This is the test of the Betty Lights Luminous Flux 50. And I also have a Nanlux 600C pointed right at the Flux 50. Mind you, this 600C is only at about 12% at daylight, 5600K. This is a 2470, I believe at somewhere around 40 mil, f2.8. And as you can see, more of a Rembrandt light when I'm this close as opposed to a loop light. But if I back up, of course, there's gonna be more light wrapping around me. And so if I take one step back, this is just a window light behind me. I don't have any backlight there. So I'm gonna open this up because when I step back, I definitely do want it to be a little bit better at wrapping and hitting the key side. I opened up the spotlight so that it's hitting the Flux 50 more entirely. And so it lit up this side of my face a lot more. As you can see, the shadow behind me right here is very soft. It's quite nice. I'm actually just gonna bump up the intensity of the 600C. Now the 600C is at 20%, still at daylight. But the reason why I did that was because in order for me to get better illuminated here on my key side, I think this is what it looked like when I was about 2 feet closer. But I really wanted to show you the quality of the shadows. That's very soft. If I move this Flux 50 closer to me, this shadow is gonna get softer. The softer the source is to the subject, the softer the shadows that is casting. Of course, if I make this Flux 50, like say if I back it up twice as far, this shadow is gonna get harder because again, the source of the light becomes smaller, in which case it casts the hardest shadow. That's just physics. And if something that you have to wrap your head around, if you're not used to thinking that way as a cinematographer or as a photographer, these are things that you're just gonna have to get used to thinking about. And really, it becomes second nature when you're constantly looking at shadow quality. You know, lighting is really less about illuminating the subject as it is about casting the shadows that you want. And this is all based on the motivation of the cinematographer, of the director, of the characters, perhaps, whatever the motivation, whatever the source of motivation is for the scene. That's generally how we approach lighting. This is 20% on the Flux 50. I'm gonna go down to 12%, which is where I had it originally. I think now that I'm looking at it, it's still quite bright. And the reason why it's brighter than earlier was because, again, the Flux 50 is being completely illuminated. Now, if I shutter this key side a little bit more so that it's not too hot, I can also just decrease the intensity of the light. Maybe 6%. This is 6% right here. You can see the shadow quality on my face as it does this little Rembrandt lighting. If I take a step back, it does open up a little bit more, especially if I turn this way. If I turn facing the key, then you can see it a lot more, see it a lot better. It's actually a really nice wrap. I don't use fill light a lot. I hardly ever use a second fixture to fill a scene, not unless I'm lighting at night, in which case it's kind of necessary. Or if you want to change the color tone of the fill side. Like say if you wanted the shadow to be a little bit more in the blue, then you can cast the fill light and put some saturation, some blue on it so that the shadow quality is more on the blue side as it is to being just neutral. This is me probably 2.5 feet away from the Flux 50. You can see the shadow quality that it's producing. If I move across the scene, so you can see that the fall off of the Flux 50 is pretty impressive. You can contain it decently well. It's not illuminating everything in the background. In fact, I'll turn it off and on. So obviously, yeah, okay, the background is getting illuminated a little bit, but it's not a whole lot. I'm guessing it's just one stop or even less. no light, and lit. So this is at 6%. If I go back to the 20% that I had when I was back here, which again, now that I'm looking at it, might be too bright. But this is lit, no light, and lit. Now this is again at 20%. The Flux 50 is completely illuminated by the 600C. And as you can see, the shadow quality behind me, still pretty interesting. Now if I get closer to the background and you can see the shadow, quite soft. This is not a scientific test. What I can say is that this quality is actually very pleasing, very soft, and it looks very natural. But it is quite soft. Kind of like it. I think this is something that I can definitely use a lot. I'm gonna close it down even more. This is 20% with about 1/3 in the middle of the Flux 50 being lit by the spotlight. And you can see how controlled the spill is. I want to shut this off, on, off, on. The shadow quality is really nice. I like it. Of course, if I step all the way back, I'm going to have to bump it up from 20%. So now this is at 100%. 100%, and only the middle third of the Flux 50 is being hit by the spotlight. This controls the spill quite nice. It just concentrates the light on the subject. Of course, when the subject is moving around, you know, this may or may not be ideal for your blocking or for your scene. I don't know. It really depends. The closer the light source is relative to the subject, the softer that shadow is. And so the shadow quality got a little bit harder, still on the soft side. It got a little bit harder because the source got smaller. See how soft that shadow is? It gets harder. Oops. It gets harder the closer I am to the background. It gets softer the farther I am from the background. So yeah, this is an interesting test.